Very pleased to welcome to the stage the Chief Commercial Officer for VFS Global, Jiten Vyas. Thank you so much. Great to hear you. And I was really interested, actually, interviewing Nick earlier when his comment about mobility. And that's such an important part of the UK-India trade partnership. Now, restoring that mobility from where we were before the pandemic to now is imperative. So tell us about your experience and how you're helping this to happen.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having us here today. VFS Global is in its 22nd year. We were conceptualized, incepted in 2001. One of the very early made in India or made out of India product. Prime Minister Modi is, I'm sure, pretty pleased about this organization. We spoke about the Tatas earlier. We are not quite there, but we are getting there. The job that we do for 67 governments is to manage the global mobility of people. If I link this to the FTA, the topic of goods, services, very important. At the end of the day, and Sir Alex said it on Monday, it's the implementation, the last mile, and that's to deal with people. What VFS does is, on behalf of, say, the UK government, our direct principal is the Home Office. We run the entire visa and immigration overseas across over 140 countries. Looking at it from an India perspective, we've seen over the years, the travel from India into the UK is increasing. Student is an extremely important parameter there. The Indian High Commissioner mentioned on Monday again that we have close to 145,000 students, Indian students now in UK universities. This morning we were speaking to a couple of colleagues from Durham University, and all of them...
My son's there.
Absolutely.
And he wants to spend more time in India.
Absolutely. It's on the back of this FTA, on the back of the pandemic now having gone through, we see ourselves as a very clear catalyst to ensure and to enable governments to implement the visa and immigration policies.
Interesting. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the technology, because traveling to, for example, the Middle East, the digital, the ability to get a digital visa it's like a sort of breath of fresh air.
Absolutely.
It's still a little bit old-fashioned. That's also due to the politics at the moment between the UK and India. Give a sense of where you think we're going, and if you compare how easy it is to get a visa or where you think it could be, how that technology-enabled, that digital process, how can that help mobility?
Look, visa in South Asian, in Latin American countries has always been a pain point. Let's be very honest about it.
That's putting it lightly.
It's a fact. Over the years, if we look at the UK-India relationship, there has been greater acceptability. Indians coming in here, investing, students, also the SME sector. You had Dhruv in the earlier segment. That's a classic example of how small, medium enterprises are now looking at overseas, UK being one market. How we see technology evolve in our world, there are two aspects of it. One, how easy can we make it for the customer, for the end user, people like all of us here, who at some point in time would require a visa to travel to the UK, to the US, Canada, or within the European Union. The second and more important piece is what sits behind on the technology. All of us are privy to some very worrying events. Prime Minister Modi in the US last week mentioned about the 9/11 and the 26/11. There are challenges governments face. They want to know who's entering their borders, and they want to know who's leaving their borders. All of this, for a consumer like us, we would want to put it to the side, but there are elements of technology by way of the front-end services. There is a huge topic of e-visas. The European Union is looking at that. From our perspective, we see that as the right thing to do. Politics are more relevant there. And then the other piece to be mindful of as far as technology is concerned is how do the users adapt to it? Your example of the UAE is a classic case in point. We're looking at markets in Latin America, in India itself. India is an amalgamation of the 27 European Union member states put together. Different languages, the ability for them to adopt the internet. All of these are topics that we are currently working through with the government, the UK, and a number of other governments on how do we bring in technology to ease the customer journey. But secondly, how do we build in technology to ensure that the decision making that the government makes on the issuance or refusal of a visa is done within the confines of the policy and procedures they have.
Tell us about how the government and the private sector work together. How can these business to government, public-private partnerships, they're called, help enhance relations?
Look, the UK government, the Home Office, has been a customer of VFS. We are in our 20th year today. It was in 2002, 2003, where for the very first time, the UK government decided to outsource. Outsourcing of a visa process was an absolute no-no. For those of you who come from the subcontinent, you would recall how the whole visa experience was pre-outsourcing. And if you recall it to today, challenges on processing time, etc., remain, but that's a separate topic. To us, this is a classic example of a true public-private partnership in all forms. Here is a government, a department, here is a private company, a private sector, managing the end-to-end administrative processes, which otherwise would have required civil servants to be based out of the 23 cities of India. And we all know the challenges of funding within governments, etc. And this, we call it a classic example of a triple P, a public-private partnership. Bringing in customer service, bringing in technology, but leaving the core decision-making to the government authorities.
Finally, I wonder if you could say a little bit about the skills, the skill building. We've talked about global talent building. We talk about how everybody needs this ability to be able to reskill all the way through their careers. And they can't always learn this online, right? Sometimes you need to go somewhere. So talk about VFS's role within that.
Absolutely. Nick earlier talked about the topic of global mobility. Within our world, I would equate this to two parts. Part one being, how does the UK, India look at the whole topic of global mobility, compare it to skills? If you look at a few years back, there was a severe crunch of chefs in the UK. Chefs in particularly the fancy Indian restaurants that all of us are happy to go to. On the other side, at a global level, VFS is very active in bringing through skills within the tier 2, tier 3 cities of India. We have
places like?
Which is places like Bhopal, Lucknow. You would go to cities. If you look at a city in India, everyone thinks of Ahmedabad, but there are other cities in India. There is Surat. There is a whole lot of talent within the tier 2 and tier 3 cities in India in particular that is waiting out to expand and look at horizons overseas. We have a partnership with the Government of India, National Skills Development Council, whereby we groom, we train individuals from these cities, enabling them to get jobs and skills within India as the first case, and thereafter looking at, depending on the interest levels of individuals, how could they enhance and explore their career opportunities overseas. UK could be a case in point, but we are still a long way. Middle East is a classic example where there's a large Indian, Filipino, Sri Lankan, Indonesian diaspora. So to our CSR for skills development, India is a case in point, but we do want to take this through other emerging markets, Indonesia, Philippines being the two others.
All right, we've run out of time, but I thank you very much for your partnership, for your time. It's been absolutely fascinating. Chief Commercial Officer for VFS Global, Jiten Vyas. So thank you so much.